Hi, and thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Phil, aka Phil, and after recovering from a stomach flu, I wanted to talk a little bit about my Q3 43, which I bought, I think it's more than a month right now, and about the normal Q3, the 28 version. Since I recently watched a couple of videos about the discussion about the 28mm and the 43 version, and I thought after being an owner of both, the original Q I bought and sold after a couple of months, I made a video about that experience up here, and I got this one, the 43 version, right at launch day. I thought I might also give you my perspective of that, and I hope you will find it somehow useful. And the first thing which I find interesting regarding this discussion about the 28 version and the 43 version of the Leica Q3, and that's somehow people treat the Q3 28 a little bit different compared to the 43. At least in my opinion, and also agree, because I did that the same while I was owning these cameras. And what I mean by that is I have the impression that the 28mm Q3 is more treated like a zoom lens instead of the 28mm prime lens, and the 43 version is much more treated like a prime lens. What do I mean by that? If you watch some of these thoughts or comparisons regarding these two versions, the most important argument people throw into this discussion is that with the 28 you have that wider focal length, and with the 43mm you are stuck at 43. You can't go wider, in contrast to the 28 where you can crop in quite tight. And if you want to get the 43 focal length in a crop mode, you don't lose that much resolution thanks to the Q3 60 megapixel sensor. And that thought I totally understand, because that's the fact, right? A 43mm is not a wider focal length, it's a tighter one. Whereas the 28mm is a wider focal length. So you can't compare a wider fixed lens with a tighter one. But I understand the discussion about that, because the Q system has a fixed lens system. You can't interchange your lens, and if you invest in one of these cameras, you are stuck with that focal length. So I do understand where this discussion comes from. Yeah, as I mentioned before, this kind of treatment, looking at the 28mm version as a more zoom lens and this 43mm as a prime lens, that's exactly how I experienced these Q3 cameras, and also how I used that. When I used the Q3 28mm previously, I also had a Q2 monochrome before. The way I was shooting these cameras was just pointed it somehow, and my mindset was automatically in crop mode. So I didn't take that much thought about my composition and so on, because my mindset was set, yeah, you can just crop in post. The focal length is quite wide, you will get that shot anyways, and you have enough resolution to get the frame you want. When I got my 43 Q3, I immediately noticed the difference, because I have a tighter focal length, and my mindset was completely different regarding the shooting thinking, however you want to say that. For me, this shooting experience is much more like a true prime lens, because you can't go wider, because it's a 43. At least for me, I was working much more on my composition, trying to get the stuff in frame or out of frame, etc. And I was not thinking much regarding the cropping decisions, because I was working more on my composition. It's funny enough that people online, and also me myself, somehow disregard that this 43 does have the same crop abilities like the Q3, 28 millimeters, just it can go much longer. But as I said, it's based on the nature of these two different lenses. One is more wider, the other is more tighter, but nobody is talking about this version, the 43, that you can crop in like a real portrait lens, like an 85 or something like that. I find that quite interesting. But yes, that's at least how my experience was, that the 28 version was for me somehow like a classical zoom lens, if you want to compare that somehow. And this one is much more like a prime lens for me. So yeah, I think in the end it's just again a matter of preference. We're still talking about two different focal lengths. If you are shooting more wider and want to have that flexibility to be more flexible on the wide end, sure, the 28 millimeter will be a better version for you. For me, I didn't enjoy that experience that much. I'm personally more a 50 millimeter guy, and the way I shoot, sometimes I also feel that 35 is already too wide for me. This Q3 43 fits perfectly in the middle, and therefore it fits my personal needs. What I also want to address or just highlight, I think every person and photographer, if you're especially using your cameras for personal work, as a hobbyist like me, I think depending on where you are at your life or at your chapter of your life, the choice of your focal length might change. Just as an idea, or what I want to say about that, I'm currently a young dad. I have two small kids. They are 1.5 and 3.5, and the main thing I do with my cameras is documenting my family. And using a more tighter focal length is of course working better for portrait work or portrait kind of photography, and that's also how I like it personally. And but on the other hand, if I was younger, or if I'm thinking way into the future, at some point where I can afford to travel a lot around the world, I think I would also choose more the 28 millimeter, just because of having the wider focal length for these kinds of trips and travels, city landscapes, etc. Just an additional thought for you to think about, where different focal length tastes and use cases and preferences might come from. As I said, I'm currently in the young family documentation phase, and that's why I chose the 43 millimeter focal length, or the Q3 43. And as I said, I'm more of a 50 millimeter guy. Some other people prefer 35, and even other people prefer the 28. So in the end, it's just again a question of personal preference. We all are people and do have different dishes, but we don't eat our favorite dishes every day, right? So we mix things up. So why don't we do that also with our cameras, our focal length? Again, I understand that the Leica Q3 system is an extremely expensive camera system with a fixed focal length. That's why the discussion is coming from. I thought I would just add my 2 cents to this topic. And yeah, here and there I also saw some videos which I think might be interesting if people will run with this kind of setup, to have basically 2 Q3s or Q cameras in their lineup. The one camera like this, the Q3 43, and then add into the mix the Q3 28. Or if you want to save a little bit of money, get the Q2. I think if we wait one more year, the Q2 will get even more affordable. Just in quotations, we know that Leica prices are still quite high, even for used camera gear. Just something I find quite interesting, having two camera bodies with two focal lengths, 28 and 43, and then you are quite covered regarding focal lengths, because you have the ability to crop in so much into the images to get these fake focal lengths. But I think that only works if you don't care about compression and so on, because when I used the Q3 28 version, I missed quite a lot these 50mm compression images, and yeah, I think that's the reason I'm enjoying this one so much, because with this one I get a little bit more compression in my images, which I personally like. But again, personal taste, right? No one is right, no one is wrong. We all do our own choices. In the end, again, besides of personal preference, it depends on your use cases and yeah, how you see these cameras or focal length in the end. And also, which might always help, is have a look at your Lightroom library, check your favorite images and with which focal length these images has been shot. And I think then you might have a direction which focal length you might prefer, or in this case, which Leica Q version. Another last gymnastic thought. Imagine if you have only the Q1, so the original Q, which only had 24 megapixels, and imagine you have to choose between the 28mm and the 43mm Q1. Just imagine the Q1 would have the 43mm. Which Q version would you then choose if you don't have the ability to crop? Also an interesting thought, I think. All right, I think I ranted enough on this topic. If you're still watching until this point, thank you very much for your time. You are the one who deserves the like for that. And if you want to support my small little channel, you can check the affiliate links below in the description, or buy me a coffee, link also in the description. And if you want to see more videos on my channel, just click on one of these and have a nice day.